140,000 Chinese laborers were shipped to the Western Front, promised clerical jobs, yet they spent 4 brutal years digging trenches, hauling shells, and filling mass graves. A mud-splattered Chinese man in a British Army cap leans over a shallow grave, shoveling earth while artillery flashes overhead. Who was the man who, weeks after the armistice, risked his life to clear Verdun's battlefield of the dead, and why was his name struck from every record? In 1917, the British and French signed secret agreements to enlist over 100,000 Chinese workers, labeling them the Chinese Labor Corps and sending them to the front. They were promised safe, non-combat duties, but the war turned their tasks into constant danger. Mud, shell fragments, and the bitter cold turned every shift into a gamble with death. By the time the guns fell silent, more than 1 in 5 of these men had perished from shelling or the 1918 flu pandemic that swept the camps. When the war ended, the Allies demanded their swift repatriation, forbidding them from settling in Europe or claiming any veteran benefits. Their names vanished from victory parades, from official histories, from the very monuments that celebrated the dead they had buried. Amid this erasure, one laborer named Zhu Fengshan refused to disappear. Born in a remote village of Guangdong, he was barely 20 when he was conscripted, his only hope a meager wage to send home. Assigned to the Verdun sector, Zhu learned to move through cratered landscapes, extracting unexploded shells that threatened nearby villages. In the spring of 1919, while the world celebrated peace, Zhu volunteered for the dangerous task of clearing the Verdun battlefield, a field littered with tens of thousands of unburied corpses. He spent weeks painstakingly digging, using a rusted spade and a makeshift metal detector fashioned from a broken rifle barrel. Each step risked a hidden mortar that could erupt at any moment, and the ground itself seemed to shift under his weight. As he uncovered a mass grave marked only by a cracked wooden cross, he whispered the names of the dead he could read on the weathered dog tags, promising them a spoken record that paperwork would never grant. Suddenly, a German artillery piece still active in the area detonated a shell just meters away, sending a blinding flash and a deafening roar that ripped the ground open. Zhu was thrown to the ground, his spade shattered, but he clutched the dog tags, his hands bleeding, his eyes burning with resolve. The explosion marked the climax of his ordeal, yet he survived, his body bruised, his spirit unbroken. News of his bravery reached a British officer who, moved by the laborer's courage, wrote his name down in an obscure ledger, a fleeting acknowledgement that would be lost for a century. Zhu returned to China in 1920, carrying the dog tags as a secret relic, never speaking of the war again. Decades later, a historian in Paris uncovered the ledger, bringing Zhu's story to light and finally giving his name back to the pages of history. Today, as we stand on the same churned earth, we remember that 140,000 men were never celebrated. But one of them dared to clear Verdun, and in doing so, he forced the world to confront its forgotten debt. In the silence that follows, the ground remembers what the record refuses to name. Recruitment posters in a bustling Shanghai market promised steady wages and safe work abroad. Young men gathered at bustling recruitment stations, clutching identity cards stamped with foreign symbols. A crowded train rolled out of the port, its wooden benches packed with hopeful laborers. The sea voyage was an endless stretch of gray waves, punctuated only by the creak of steel and distant cannon echoes. In the muddy camp near Ypres, rows of canvas tents housed dozens of men sharing a single pot of thin broth. The 1918 flu struck the camp, coughing up blood, turning the night into a chorus of rattling breaths. Nightfall brought the distant thud of mortars, shaking the ground and rattling the tin roofs. A British officer inspected the laborers, his eyes scanning the soot-blackened faces for signs of fatigue. The final repatriation ship bobbed at the harbor, its hull painted white as a symbol of return. The obscure ledger was discovered in a dusty archive, its pages yellowed and brittle. A historian's hand lifted the brittle page, revealing Zhu Fengshan's name written in ink. The ink glowed faintly under a soft lamp, as if demanding to be read aloud. Finally, the camera pans over the cleared Verdun battlefield, now quiet with wildflowers sprouting among the old shell craters.